Okay guys, welcome back to Cobra Vids. In this video, we're going to be removing the stereo unit out of my wife's 2017 Jetta. This has got the full touchscreen and everything, and I did the one in my son's Passat, which was pretty much the same exact. It had a trim piece that went all the way across the top of the dash that was connected to this piece that we actually had to remove in order to get the deck out. But this one's going to be a little easier, I think. So let's get started. Right down here, we have my remote wire for the amplifier and some RCA cables for the amp input. RCAs are always low signal input. There's no amplified signal coming out of an RCA. So what I have to do, I did this yesterday. I just wired it up to there, and everything is wired seamlessly back through the factory wiring channel, and it's all attached to the main wiring harness going to the back of the car. So, how to get the stereo out? Well, I don't really know, but I'm going to take one stab at it. And what I believe is I have to carefully pop this piece off, because this is all connected, but I don't think this is connected, so we don't have to pull the knobs off like on the old stereos. So there's no screws down here, which leads me to believe that it just pops in. So let's not delay any longer. We're going to get it off. But first, I'm going to show you the device that I bought. This here is to prevent any wire cutting of the factory plug. And what this does is one end plugs into the back of the stock unit, and then the factory wiring plugs into the other side, and it allows you to have a remote wire. All right, so we're going to use this piece. We're going to wire it in, and hopefully we can get this installed without any further problems. All right, so as you're popping out this molding piece, be very careful. I'm just use a tiny little screwdriver, and as long as you're careful, you're not going to damage anything. And once you get it started, then moving over and getting the other side done will be much easier. See? There we go. See, it's coming out. You don't just want to yank on this here like this, because you will crack it. That's why you get under it with a screwdriver or a shim pick or whatever body tool, trim tool, and you feel around for the actual clips, and you get right in there and you pop them up at the clips. Let me finish getting this cover off, and then I'll be right back. Okay, this cover comes off just like that, and as you can see, there's clips all the way around. I did not break anything or any of the clips, so that is a bonus. It's always a bonus when you don't break plastic things. But anyway, to get the deck the rest of the way out, it's pretty simple. You just get a Torx bit and take out these 4 screws here, and then the deck will come out. Okay, so the deck slides out once you get those four screws out of there. And here's all the wires at the back of the deck. There's one for the antenna, and there's some for the other, for the rear camera and everything. So there's not much room in there. So I'll show you the trick to get this installed. I'll show you the problem and the trick. First of all, we need to detach this plug here, and we need to get it. Alrighty, guys. This is day 2 of the Jetta stereo install. I had to knock off because time got late. I needed some other supplies, and my wife needed her car. So I don't know if I showed you guys how to put this back in. Of course, I showed you how to pull it out, and as far as mounting, it goes the opposite way. But what I wanted to show you is that the cables, the adapter that you use to get the signal for the RCAs, they are, how can I put it? They're too bulky to slide the deck into its factory place. So what you have to do is you have to take that cable, that adapter, and while you're holding the stereo out here, you have to slip your hand back there and kind of push it downward so that as you push the deck back, it kind of curls back. And it took me a few times to get it. It just curved into the bottom back behind the selectors here just perfectly. It took me a little bit of finesse to get it there, but I was able to. Now, the Passat, the only differences between the Passat is the Passat has this stripping that goes across this way and a little bit toward the dash, and it's all connected to this piece here. And with the small wedge or the small screwdriver, you just got to pop it open carefully, and it comes off the same way as this. And the Passat, the 2018, 17, 18, you can actually undo this piece here and slide this all the way out, and you can reach in there and grab that adapter and pull it downward while the stereo head unit is going in. And that makes it so much easier. Now this one, I think because this is the Jetta and not the fancy Passat, the selector here, I think, is cable driven, because I could not pull this out without reaching in here and unhooking the cable that switched it from cold to hot. Okay, so that was the downfall of the Jetta. But the Passat, I did, my son's Passat, he has a 2018, and we were able to pull this piece out and slide it all the way out, and we were able to reach in there and pull that adapter out. So, all right. So now that we got that covered, one thing I wanted to share with you all is the 2017 Jetta, ours right here, does not have a remote wire available on the deck. For some reason, it does not. The Passat did, but this one did not. And so what I'm going to be forced to do is I'm going to be forced to bring an accessory powered wire, and we are going to mount a switch right in one of these, probably on the opposite side, so it's away from the engine switch. So just in case she reaches, she's reaching over here to flip it on and off. And I say she because this is my wife's car. And so she doesn't accidentally hit that at the wrong time. So we'll probably mount it over here if possible. The switch I got almost looks like it would slip into the spot. So I'm hoping these are just covers, and I'm able to pop this up and just slap that switch right in there, because it almost looks like it's the same size. Wouldn't that be awesome? So if there's any of the equipment that I'm using that you want to know where I got it from, please just leave a comment and I will get that information to you. So anyway, here's wires. No, these aren't going to stay like this. One's RCA and one's the remote wire. So I have to track down a remote, or excuse me, an accessory wire. Gotta spit that out. Kapoo! One that's turned on with the power. Once the ignition is on, I need to have a 12-volt supply with the switch, and then I'm going to run that up underneath this here and mount that switch in here. Okay guys, what I've done is I've grabbed a little prong that matches the prongs of the fuses, and I found an unused fuse location that I just plugged it in, and it is supplying 12 volts with the key on and 0 with it off. So this is what I'm going to use for my remote wire. It is crimped in here, and it's insulated around here, which doesn't really mean anything, but now I have it inserted there. Now I'm going to add a fuse to this link here, and then run that to my switch for my remote wire. And then at that moment there, we should be ready to mount the switch and continue on. But I just wanted to show you that's what I did, and that is the location that I chose. Your car might have a fuse there, but this one does not. Okay guys, as you can see, it's a very clean install. Of course, I gotta detail my wife's car out. It's not very clean, but the install is pretty clean. No hanging wires. I actually ran the remote wire from the fuse box and back to the amp. I ran it up and down through here and underneath this paneling and up in here. I've popped this off, and all it took was a little screwdriver, and I popped all the clips up. And you could see the wires right there. They're tucked up underneath here away from the shifter, so I don't see that interfering. And then I have them brought up through this very end one here, because the switch I'm using, this round rocker switch, it looks like, whoops, oh my God, whew, got me a little dizzy there. It looks like it's going to fit in here pretty nicely. It's going to sit on top of this panel here, because as you can see, it's going to just snap into there. But my goal is to make it look as factory as possible. And so what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to take a file and file out these pieces of plastic top and bottom so that, so that the rounded parts of the switch, not focusing, but the rounded spots of the switch will slip down on the top and bottom of that. And then it's really just going to lock into the top cover. And I'm hoping once it's all done, it's going to look nice. And it's going to be in there solid. Okay, in order for the base of that to sit in here, I had to kind of like mill out around the plastic below here, back in here. And I got it to where the plug or the switch slips in. So now I'm going to leave this loose here until I got these wires wired up, and then we'll pop this all in and attempt to slip that switch in. Keeping my fingers crossed, guys. All right, guys, that's the end product of the switch install. I think it looks pretty factory. I mean, it could be better, but it's better than a big metal floppy switch like I could have got. But for the most part, I think it fits in there nice, and it's away from the ignition button right here. So I think we're pretty much done, guys. I may pull the deck out again, because on the back of that that adapter that we used on there, the RCA box, there's tiny little holes to turn up gains, and I want to put them about halfway. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the deck out again, because I didn't even think about that when I was installing it. It was hot out here and I was trying to get done, so that was my fault. But I'm going to go ahead and pull it back apart and change the gains. But I would play it for you and show you how it sounds, but of course that never translates through video. So just take my word, it is putting out some bass, and we're looking pretty good. So that's going to wrap it up for this video, installing a stereo into the Jetta, including a switch here. And that is ran off of the ignition. So when the ignition is on, it's powered up, but you have the option to turn it on and off just in case you don't want the bass, or you're not playing your stereo. There's no sense in having the amp running. Now normally I would put a remote wire on the stereo so that when you turn the stereo on, it supplies the power, but for some reason this deck does not have a remote wire available. The Jetta did, or the Passat did, but the Jetta does not. I did some research, and others have said the same thing. So I'm going to just leave it at that and let my wife play around with it. But I am going to adjust those gains on that box so that we can get about halfway. And all right, guys, thank you for watching Cobra Vids. Please like, subscribe, and give me a thumbs up. And we'll keep doing these videos for you. Until next time, guys, stay safe, stay free. Okay, now since we got the remote wire all taken care of, now we have to make the connections to the batteries. Here is our 4-gauge wire, and this is actually an aluminum, copperized aluminum type of wire. I might be wrong, but that's what it looks like. It looks like copper, but when you cut into it, you can see the core is actually aluminum. So that's what I'm going to call it. If you know the correct term, please share that knowledge with all of us. But it looks like copperized aluminum. That's what it looks like. But it will work for our purpose, definitely. All right, so the first connection I'm going to do is I'm going to do the ground wire. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some good solid copper connectors to mount to that ground right there. That ground is where the cable that comes from the battery is mounted, and we're going to use that post as our ground. That's a 13 millimeter nut right there, so we're going to go ahead and pull that off and be right back. Alright guys, in order to get this battery out, you got to undo the terminals, which they're 10 millimeters. I've already undone this wire nut from the ground there, and then you have to get this bolt down here, and that's what it looks like right there, and that holds the battery in. It's important to get that back in there, and it hangs over the edge of the battery right here. It's important to get that in there because that keeps your battery from jiggling around in there, and so once your cables are off, then you're able to get this insulator off here. A lot of people just take those off of there, but it was put there by the factory, so I like to keep things the way the factory has it, because I've said before, the people who build these cars are much smarter than me when it comes to these cars, so I try to keep things the way they have it so that everything runs the way it's supposed to. But anyway, so now my battery's loose. I'm going to remove the battery. Well, I was going to remove the battery. So back up, redo that because I chose to go a different route. So, okay, so now that the battery terminals are loose, now I can start installing the terminals for our wiring. Okay, there's a lot of extra wire here, but I'm going to make the connection to the battery terminal prior to trimming this down, because I'll make the connection, cut it down somewhere, and install the fuse, and then I'll trim it down so it's nice and neat. Okay, these are the connectors I'm going to be using for the positive and the negative pieces. The nut here, the nut on here is actually pressed in. There's a piece here that's pinged so that this nut will not come off. It just loosens up enough to pull the battery cable off, and then it stops. So on my son's, we wound up pulling this all the way off and realized we couldn't get the nut back on very easy, so I had to replace the bolt that clamps that on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something a little different today. By the way, that fits on there pretty decently. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to cut the tip off of it so it slides onto it without having to remove that nut. I'll show you what I mean in just a second. Okay, here is my solution to it. So I don't have to force this nut off and replace that factory bolt. I went ahead and just ground down, let's get that focused a little better. I ground down this corner here, and I used a file to take off the corners, just enough to pop that onto the bolt itself. And then once that's on there, it's not going to move. Now for the ground, as you can see, it is not large enough to go on there. It kind of fits on the threads a little bit. So what I have to do is I have to drill this out larger. And that's what I did for my son's car. So I'm going to drill that out and I'm going to show you what I did. All right, here you go, guys. I used a 5/16 drill bit, and that seems to be very snug on there, but I can work it on and off there. And I don't want to go too thin because I don't want to thin out the walls. And now, okay. Questions come up a lot about wiring up a stereo system. And And all throughout my teenage years, I had big and small stereo systems, you know, thousands of watts, hundreds of watts. And what I learned by trial and error is that you want your positive and your negative connections as close to the battery as possible, because if you ground your amplifiers to the chassis because it's easier, you're going to be so far away from the real ground. Okay, you'll have your amp dimming out. Dimming, I mean, it's not going to be able to pull as much power. When you connect closest to the battery as possible, you get the best power feed for your amp. Okay, people might disagree with me, but this is my opinion only. So if you want to ground at the chassis, you know, scrape the paint and try to get the best connection possible, you go right ahead. Or do like me, take the extra time, run an extra ground wire. And the ground I'm using is a 4-gauge wire. It's the same as the positive line I'm running, and this is going to get you the best connection possible to the battery, and you will not regret it. If you're doing just like a 100-watt amp, yeah, you could probably get away with doing the chassis grounds, but I'm only running a 150-watt amp in my wife's car running 112. I'm still going all the way to the battery as close as possible. So do what's easier for you, but just keep in mind, if you're going to run thousands of amps or thousands of watts, go ahead and get as close to the battery as possible. Okay, so I'm going to get these wired up. I'm going to get the ground wire connected first, and then we'll work on the 12. Okay, so we got the positive wire installed, as well as the... Alright, we've got the positive wire installed with the fuse. I'm going to attach it to the side of this box here so it doesn't rattle around in there. I'm going to use some double-sided sticky tape. If you use some really good stuff and clean the surface, then it will stick. And I'll have to remove the battery in order to service that fuse. But if your stereo system goes just fine, then you won't ever have to access that fuse. But if you short something out or your amp fries, then you'll have to get in there. But that's a very small chance. I've got my battery insulator back in, and everything's hooked up, tightened up, and so now the amplifier should power up when the remote wire is engaged.